Hello, welcome to the second episode of The Legal Lens, a podcast where we sit down with legal professionals, public servants, and policy leaders to uncover the real journeys behind careers in law and government. I'm Vivian.
And I'm Tony, and we are your hosts, and we started this podcast to help young people like ourselves explore the many paths to public service and hear the stories and advice from those already walking them.
Today, we're incredibly excited to speak with Mr. Brandon Hembree, the current mayor of the city of Sugar Hill in Georgia and a lobbyist for Impact Public Affairs.
He has an incredible track record of serving the people of Georgia, from starting out as a staff aide to the Georgia Senate Appropriations Committee as a legislative associate for Ford Motor Company in 1998, and as a director for the Georgia Department of Administrative Services in 2001. He's also a proud graduate of Georgia State University with a major in political science for the pre-law track.
Mr. Hembree, thank you so much for joining us today.
Vivian and Tony, thank you. It's an honor to be on with you today.
Sounds good. So we're just gonna jump straight into question. Could you please tell us a little bit about your background, other than what Tony just said, and what have you been up to recently?
Well, thank you again, Vivian. I grew up in Georgia. I was born here and have spent my entire life in Metro Atlanta, and so I'm one of those unusual people that's from here. And increasingly I meet people that have traveled to Georgia from elsewhere, and that is absolutely fantastic. I love the diversity that brings to our state. But I come from a single family, a single parent background, and went through school with a love of government and politics. And I knew that is what I wanted to study at Georgia State University. It was just a passion of mine. And that came from my mother being a lifelong federal employee, and from my grandfather as well, who retired from the Army. They just instilled in me a love of public service, and so I knew that I wanted to do that. And then when I graduated from Georgia State University, I just worked hard to network and to make connections professionally, and that's what brought me to where I am today. And I'm very privileged, in addition to being the mayor of Sugar Hill and a partner in a governmental affairs firm. I'm also an adjunct professor at Georgia State University, and I teach the Georgia politics course, and that is something that I love to do. I combine history and politics, and those are two of my very favorite things to talk about.
That is so wonderful.
Oh, that must be amazing having a family with such a long track record of public service, Army, a federal employee. I want to know, as a follow-up, how big of a role did your mother and your grandfather play in your journey to being who you are now?
They both played a big role, and uh, the reason is because not only was it just a career for them, but it was a passion. It's something that they chose to do, and throughout their life, both of them retired from their respective careers. They loved it, and they thought um, very highly of the institutions that they served, and it was something that they were proud of, and it had a huge impact on me.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. So moving into our second question. So you did not go down the law path after political science. You continue into politics and government affairs. So why did you make the choice to go straight into politics and not jump into law school? And do you have any regrets, and what do you love about it?
That is such a good question. And the thing that I try to coach students on all the time is that there's so many different career paths that come from a political science degree and political science background. And when I was young, I was under the impression that the best way to get into public service was through having a law degree. And I discovered that that was not the case through my time at Georgia State University. I loved the pre-law track. I think it trained me and educated me in ways that a normal political science degree would not have accomplished. But once I started to do my internship, I realized the fact that public service doesn't just require a law degree, it requires different expertises in order to make the process work. And so when I did my internship with the state Senate, the Senate Appropriations Committee, I met a lot of elected officials that were past school teachers. They were business owners. They just brought different perspectives, and it just made me realize that that I didn't need a law degree in order to be in public service.
So you said that, like other than a law degree, there's so much more into becoming a public servant. So why did you decide to enter municipal politics specifically?
Yeah, honestly, starting out, I had aspirations to be in Congress or to be a governor or to be the president of the United States. I think a lot of young people aspire for those very lofty positions without really kind of knowing other areas that you can serve in your community. And as I've gotten older, I have become more invested in the community that I live in. And when that happens, it just becomes important to you to play a role in making certain that that community is the best that it can be. And so about 30 years ago, I moved to Sugar Hill. And within those 30 years, I've just fallen in love with it. Become my it's become my hometown, essentially. So as I said earlier, very few of us actually live in the hometown where we were born. And so that means that we need to make a choice wherever we are to serve and to pour into that community that we've chosen to be in. And so I just developed a strong desire to want to be connected in the community that I chose to live and to have a positive impact on it.
That's great to hear because, I think a lot of people, as you said, and especially still to this day, they still think if I want to be a public servant, then I need a JD, or if I go down the political science path, the most ideal path for me is to become an attorney
Yeah.
and perhaps to be a governor, a senator, and a president, as I mentioned when I first met you. Um, and I think it's great that you are participating in municipal politics because that's where the change really begins at the city level, not at the federal level. So going into community, what did campaigning look like for you and how did you hire people to help you? And does community support and presence aid into a successful campaign?
Great question. And it's going to differ. It's going to differ at each level. Um, it's mostly about grassroots when you're running a campaign for mayor or for city council. You have a much smaller footprint, so it's easier to go door to door and to really connect with people. And I think that is an important aspect of campaigning at the local level. As you get up in the structure of government, the footprint becomes greater, and it becomes much more difficult for you to have that type of grassroots impact. You might need to divert towards doing more mailings or more speaking engagements to chambers of commerce or whatever group you decide that you want to focus on. The cost really at the local level are minimal in comparison to a campaign at the state and federal level. And that's really, I think, the great thing about local campaigns is that really anybody with the time and the ability to campaign can engage in those activities without really having to think a whole lot about the cost of campaigning. And so during my past campaigns, I have really focused a lot on push cards and doing door to door and engaging with those local civic groups that have an impact here in the community. I've never really hired anyone to manage a campaign for me at the local level. It's just not really necessary, but it does increasingly become a necessity when you campaign for those higher levels of government service.
So when you campaign at the very local level, like doors to door, what do you think made you successful in those campaigns? Were there any qualities, any other than like engaging with civic groups? Are there any other things that you did that you think make you successful in those campaigns?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that uh, you're really knocking on that door to listen, not necessarily to sell yourself. That comes through the conversation that you're having with the person that opens the door. But you should go in there with the goal of listening to them and answering whatever questions that they might have about you or the issues that you're going to be focused on. The great thing about local elections in Georgia is that they're all nonpartisan. And so you can really, I think, focus on the issues that are most important to the community that you live in. You're still going to get questions from people about how you feel about certain federal issues, but the fact that it is nonpartisan and that you're running in a nonpartisan race, I think it makes the conversation a whole lot easier.
And I really loved how you said, door-to-door campaigning is really about listening to people because, for young people who want to enter the municipal level of politics, they may overassert themselves, and you obviously have a high sense of confidence and ambition when you're younger. So it's, I
Yeah.
think, very important for you to have mentioned that it's really about the listening.
Right.
And for people who are going to try to get into municipal politics, either as a council member or as a mayor, rejection is inevitable along the path when you're campaigning. So how do you deal with that?
Rejection is hard. There's no doubt about it. And if I could, I might go back a step because I think I think there are some important steps that you need to go through before you consider running for city council or running for mayor locally. And that is, um, it shouldn't be your first time serving your community. So you should, um, you should get involved in other ways and you should serve in other ways before you make the decision to campaign for an elected position. And when you do that, you you develop um, the experience that helps you know where you serve best. And I think that that helps when you experience a defeat. I think that helps you move forward because you already have a past of service, and you know where you've been impactful. And I think the lessons learned become easier when you have that experience and you suffer a defeat.
I like how
And
you say that. Sorry, Tony, I'll just quickly add. I like how you say that, like identifying where you can serve and knowing the impact that you made and then learn from it is what keep you going through those rejections. I think that's really important to many young people because, like after campaigning people and failing, people will be like, am I meant for this job or am I good enough? And they don't really think about what lessons they can learn. And I think that's really important. Um, and then my next question would be that as you said about campaigning, right? A lot of people often overlook the power or the impact that you can make at the municipal level. People would usually think that, the federal level can usually bring to them what they want, which is a lot of people have been thinking. So as the mayor yourself, can you share with us like the impact and the work that you did that, brought change to Sugar Hill?
Right. So the great thing about serving at the local level is you you see the impact that you have, that your decisions have, because you're living in the community. And so whatever decisions you make, you're impacted by them as well. And I think that creates a level of accountability that you don't have at the state and federal level because you're more distant from the community that they're serving. And we absolutely need people to serve at the state and federal level. Don't get me wrong there, but I just think at the local level, you're gonna have the most impact. Um, and I think what people fail to realize is that yeah, lots of decisions are made at the federal and state level about education funding, about transportation infrastructure, you name it. But at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of that local community to make sure that that infrastructure is built and that it's maintained, that the schools um, serve the children of the community well, that parents serve on parent-teacher organizations, which, believe me, is so much more important than any policy that's set at the federal and state level. I think those are the things that at the local level can be given as examples of things that are impactful and critical. And I'll give you one example because I hate to just throw out just broad language, but some of one example of something that I have been able to be impactful with here locally is just bringing the schools together with the city and with the churches. And that's not something that's in the mayor's job description necessarily, but the position creates the opportunity for um, that role to take place. And so one of the things that I very quickly realized is that um, when it comes to serving our kids, it's not just a responsibility of the parents and the schools, it's the responsibility of the community as a whole. And so when you bring all the parts of the community together, you're going to have a greater impact. And so one of the examples that I have is mental health is a huge challenge here in Sugar Hill. It's a huge challenge statewide and nationally. And if you look at the data specifically for students, the thoughts of suicide that occur, even with our middle schoolers here in Georgia, is just unbelievably high. And there's something going on in our schools. And as I said before, we cannot leave it up to our schools and parents to deal with that on their own. This has to be something that the entire community has their eyes and ears on. And so we were doing some really innovative things here in Sugar Hill in a partnership between the schools, the church, and the city. We're actually doing suicide awareness and prevention training for anybody in the community that regularly interacts with kids, and we're hoping that that's going to really help the suicide rates here in Georgia. And as much respect as I have for our state and federal elected officials, that's not something that they're going to be able to accomplish at their level. They're going to be able to send us funding here locally in order for us to make that happen. But it's really at that grassroots level where people are going to make a difference in the communities that they live in.
I love how you mentioned the important aspect of community because, as you said, municipal politicians are more better able to suit that since they're able to reach out to their constituents better, bring churches and schools together, which is something that the federal politicians cannot because they're not always in their state. Sometimes they're in Washington, D.C., and I think a lot of people start to lose faith in the politicians because they don't feel the impact and they don't see the policy changes being manifested in the community. And I think you rightfully explained why municipal politics is so essential because it has a strong presence in the community. You can feel it right away. And I commend the work that you are doing to improve mental health in the state of Georgia.
Thank you, Tony.
And going further into your task as a mayor, how much work is distributed between you and the other city council members, if you do correlate?
I think honestly, local service is intended to be part-time, at least from a compensation standpoint. Um, it's essentially volunteer pay, but I think any good local elected official that you talk to will tell you that uh, the community that they live in deserves more. And so I I think it depends on the community that you live in, but I think at least here in Sugar Hill, there's an equal amount of service that comes from the mayor and the 5 city council members that we have, and that's a good situation to be in. That's probably not um, the case everywhere, but um, as far as the responsibilities that a mayor has versus a city council member, again, that's going to vary city by city in Georgia, depending on how the roles are called out in the charter that actually creates the city. In Sugar Hill, at least, the responsibility for community engagement is split evenly between all the elected officials that we have in the city.
Mhm. To follow up on your answers for that, as a student who considering like different career path, we often look at like work-life balance of each like
Yes,
career. So can you describe like your work-life balance looking like as a mayor?
it's hard. And I wish I could give you great advice on it, but I struggle with it every day. Um, the the most hard, and I'll just uh, speak from the heart on this. The most heartbreaking thing for me, I think, um, is the knowledge that there are so many needs in a community, in every community, that just cannot be accomplished with the manpower or the finances that exist. And when you love the place that you live, you never want to say no to anything because everything's worthy, right? Every person's worthy, every issue's worthy, every need is worthy, and it's hard. It's hard to say no, but you have to because that's the only way that that you can serve well, that you can have that life work balance, which is it's so important because if you don't have that, you're not going to serve well. Um, and and I know I'm just talking high level because again, this is something that I really struggle with. But um, maybe the best thing for me to do is just to kind of give some tools that I use to help me that might be helpful for others that are considering serving and worried about that work life balance. You have to pick the things that you're passionate about. Um, those passions are placed in your heart for a reason, and when you serve towards those passions, um, you're going to do it with the energy that you need to make a change. And so, I have really been self introspective the last several years about where my passions lie, and I focus on those passions. I think that is advice number one.
Mhm.
The other advice that I try to give is that your service is not it's not it's not everything. You have you have family and friends that are important to serve as well, and 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 you need to serve all those areas uh, well. And when you do that, you have a more wholesome heart towards service. Um, and I always try to think about, um, what do I expect from my friends? I expect them to hold me accountable, and I want them to do the same. I want to do the same for them, and to have those checks and balances in place, to have the friends and the family that can hold you accountable for um, not having that proper work-life balance.
Mhm.
I think it's essential. Those are just a couple of things that again I don't do perfectly, but I try the best that I can. That's all you can ask for.
Yeah.
Do the best that you can.
And I think those were such amazing pieces of advice, not only for people seeking a career as a public servant, but also people who want to become attorneys or judges, to focus
Yeah,
on what you can and what you're passionate about. Because at the end of the day, sometimes you can't really have a case come out in your favor. And I think that's really crucial because at those level, being a judge and an attorney, sometimes the person's livelihood is in your hand, and you have to find a way to cope with that and move on. And for young people out there in Sugar Hill, especially, what are the steps for citizens to invoke change within the city? And if you are involved, where can you be or are involved in that process?
yeah. It first starts with, as we both have just said, it starts with finding what you're passionate about. Um, and there's so many issues that need to be addressed in every community across Georgia and in every community across the US. Find your passion, find your place to plug in your community. I think that is step one. And don't be a stranger to your elected officials. Reach out, let them know what you're passionate about, and ask them how you can engage and improve that in the community that you both live in. I think that is step two. And then find people like you that are passionate about the same issue. We are not designed to do things by ourselves. That's the one thing that I have discovered the most through being an elected official. It is impossible for me to make change without the support of other people in the community. And when you do all those three things, I think it opens the door for you to find a way to improve the community that you live in.
I think that's really wonderful. I was surrounded by a lot of like young people wanting to make changes. They experience a lot of problems and they'd be like, how can this be changed? Like who do I reach out to? So would you recommend like specifically a mayoral career to young people who are like passionate about making changes?
I think I think what I think whatever level of government you want to serve in, I think that's your choice, and I think you can be impactful. Um, in in my life right now, the mayor's role is the right place to be. Um, that might change um, in time, I might be able to better utilize my experience in Congress or um, in the state House of Representatives or in the state Senate. I think you just have to allow your life experiences to get you to the place uh, where you need to be in certain parts of your life.
Mhm.
And so for me, serving as the mayor is the right thing for me right now. It might be the right thing for someone that's 21 years of age. They might make a decision to run for mayor in their community and they might win.
Mhm.
And that might be the right place and the right time for them. And I would just encourage people to kind of be open to just kind of let your life and your experience um, take you where you need to be at different times um, in your life.
Thank you so much for that piece of advice, and I admire that advice, certainly so, because I believe that a lot of young people, including myself, we have this destined goal of what we want to be, and if we don't get there, then we failed our expectations and goals, and then that's really draining on our mental health. But in reality, I think what you said holds true, since I know a lot of people out there who just let life take them through their career journey, and they end up in a comfortable position where they want to be. And at the end of the day, they didn't tax so much mental fatigue. Uh, so moving on to your involvement in the Georgian State Congress, you were a legislative associate for the Ford Motor Company in 1998, and then you moved on to be a director of the Georgia Department of Administrative Affairs in '01. And now you are a lobbyist for public impact affairs. So how did you enter each of these roles? Give us your story and what drove you.
Yeah. As I said, uh, during the introduction, I've always had an interest in politics um, and public service, and so um, I went into college with the idea that that is where I was being led. Um, you know, as a college student, we we don't we don't always know what the next steps are after college, and I struggled, for the first 6 months after I graduated, trying to find my career path. And I had a number of opportunities brought to me that honestly would not have happened had I not done the internship through Georgia State University with the Georgia General Assembly. That's what really opened a lot of doors for me from both a perspective standpoint and a relationship standpoint. And I always try to emphasize to people that it is a combination of the people that we know and the experiences that we have that help us move through whatever career it is that we choose. And so the internship for me um, was was a game changer. It changed my entire life. Um, and I'll just focus on it with you from a perspective change point standpoint. It helped me to it helped me to it helped me to realize all the different pathways in my career choice. But to be honest with you, it was really my first professional experience outside of school, and it helped me understand what I was good at and what I needed to improve upon. And so, in addition to the relationships, I think the experience itself was really what helped me out the most.
I think I would like to follow up on your answer. I think you might have touched on it, but you talked about your internship and how it really impacted you with the Georgia General Assembly. What specific tasks did you do with that internship, and how did that help you?
That's a great question. So, internships are not they're not sexy. Like they're all about doing whatever somebody asks you to do. And I'll never forget uh, my first day. Uh, I was asked whether or not smoking bothered me, and I didn't smoke, but I didn't really care, and so I said, "No, it doesn't. It doesn't bother me at all." And so I didn't realize though that the state senator that I was going to be working with was a chain smoker. He smoked, I can't tell you how many cigarettes a day. And because of his position, that office was one of the only designated places for anybody in the state capitol to smoke. And so there were people that were coming in and out of that office all day long, specifically to go smoke in his office. And I'll never forget that first week. I was like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? But sometimes you have to, through internships, sometimes you have to kind of deal with things like that, that, you might normally say no to. Sometimes you just have to deal with those things in order to get the experiences that you need. And so that was just one thing that really stood out to me that first week. I did everything from put things on the senator's calendar each and every day, which was a difficult task because sometimes he might have 5 or 6 things at the same time, and you had to kind of help him navigate around the Capitol to make sure that he got everywhere that he needed to get. I answered phones. I delivered mail. I did whatever they asked me to do to show that I was interested in learning and that I was interested in helping them succeed. And that's what it takes to be an intern. You're not there to be comfortable. You're there to be pushed out of your comfort zone, and you're there to do things that you would never think of doing. And that's what it takes to be successful as an intern, and that's what it takes to be successful in life.
I think that was an amazing piece of advice that you gave because, uh, you know, people often seek career paths without really knowing the insight or the experience of what that particular field of career does. And also, as a college student, uh, you may have not experienced any professional expertise in the job market yet. So you may not know what you're heading into. And I loved how you mentioned that internships allow you to gain insight and make that transition from student to professional.
I had never worked in an office, and I'll give you another example of something that just stands out to me. I think my first or second day, the senator asked me to help him make copies of a document that he was going to take to a meeting, and I had never used a copy machine. And the papers were stapled together, and I put them stapled together in the copy machine, and it jammed up the whole copy machine.
Oh, no.
And he looked at me and he said, "You've never used a copy machine before, have you?" And I said, "No, I have not." And he said, "It's totally okay. That's what you're here to learn, and we're going to get this figured out." And we figured it out. And he went up to his meeting. I think he ran. He was a little late, um, but that Tony, what you said is perfect. You don't really know what experience you need sometimes until you get into the experience itself.
Now, notably, we noticed that, as mentioned, one of your career posts was as a director of the Georgia Department of Administrative Services. And what were your responsibilities as a director, and how big of a role is that within Georgian politics?
It was a big role, and to be honest with you, it was out of my comfort zone. But I took it because I knew it would help me long term. I've tried to be really strategic in life about all the different career steps that I've taken and the timing. But at the Department of Administrative Services, my responsibilities were to be the legislative liaison between the state agency and the Georgia General Assembly. And so, as a state agency, we were impacted by the funding and policy decisions that the House and the Senate made. And so, the the position was really important for the state agency itself, but for all of the employees that served the state agency. And in addition to that, I did customer service and marketing for the agency, which to be honest with you, has a connection to that legislative liaison governmental affairs role, because at the end of the day, we're selling an idea to the policymakers that we are lobbying or that we are interacting with. And so equally important to the legislative liaison role was the marketing responsibility. And additionally, it was very important to me from a career development standpoint.
Oh, wow. So, you talk about how, like this is like repeating what we just asked like a while ago. Would you recommend this position to somebody who wants to make change in public policy and government?
Absolutely. I mean, I think every role that I have assumed in life has been a way to impact policy. And I think this is really important for people to know and to understand, particularly political science students. You don't have to be an elected official to impact policy. There are so many different roles and ways that an individual can make change at the local, state, or federal level. In the class that I teach, I talk a lot about the fact that within all the different career pathways of a political science major, there are impactful ways to initiate change. You can be a lobbyist for a governmental affairs firm that represents multiple clients, and you can impact policy. You can be a volunteer for a nonprofit agency like the court-appointed special advocates that intercede, during judicial cases regarding children and abuse and parental supervision. You can impact in that way. You can be a legislative liaison with a state agency and have a huge impact on what that state agency is able to do, but also all the employees that are employed by that state agency that rely on federal funding in order for federal and state funding in order for them to be able to have jobs. And so there's so many multiple pathways that people can have, that people can take to have an impact on policy.
I loved how you mentioned the arrays of career opportunities that relate to public policy and government. You know, a goal of our podcast is to really introduce people to different fields of careers that they can partake. And I really appreciate that piece of advice for our podcast and for our listeners. Now, moving on to your career as a lobbyist, as you mentioned, lobbying is one of those career choices that you can partake without being elected. What does the schedule of a lobbyist look like? And more specifically, what tasks do you handle if you can share?
So it depends on the type of lobbyist that you are. If you are a nonprofit lobbyist or a state agency lobbyist, your focus is going to be more narrow. You're going to be working on a limited number of specific policy issues, and so your time commitment's not going to be the same as somebody that lobbies for a firm, and that might represent multiple clients with different interest. I can only really kind of tell you the day-to-day for me. Um, it is mostly busy during the legislative session, January, February, and March, and that is specific to Georgia. There are states that are on different timelines than we are, but the General Assembly here in Georgia, they meet during those 3 months. Those are busy times for lobbyists that are engaged in state policy lobbying. And uh, during those 3 months, you're going to be from the minute that you get up in the morning to the time that you go to bed at night, you're going to be eating, sleeping, and breathing Georgia politics at that time. Most lobbying firms in Georgia also represent clients that have an interest in board and commission decisions or purchasing decisions that are made by state agencies. And that is not limited to the first 3 months of every year. That is something that is year round. And so it's going to take up more from a career time standpoint. For me, I am really busy January, February, March. I am mostly busy the rest of the year with clients, but with some flexibility to be able to serve as a local elected official. And I think that's one of the things that I love most about the lobbying field that I have chosen, is that it provides you with some time flexibility that you wouldn't normally have with an 8 to 5 job with the company.
Thank you so much for your answer. I think I have a better idea what a lobbyist actually does now. So, within the role, other than your clients, do you often work with like congressional members?
Uh, Not with our firm. So there are firms that focus on federal level policy, and they would have more of a focus with our U.S. Congress or U.S. Senate. Our firm, very early on in its history, chose to focus on state and local government here in Georgia. And so we concentrate solely on that. There's obviously some overlap with Georgia's congressional delegation. And so, yeah, there is a little bit of interaction with the U.S. congressional delegation.
Thank you so much, Mayor Hembree. And as we both know, there's a negative stereotype around lobbyists. They often get painted as corrupt and get blamed for bribes or money laundering in politics. And in your career as a lobbyist, do you think that stereotype holds true?
That's such a great question. And I talk about this with my class at Georgia State University quite a bit um, because it's a stereotype that's so prevalent. I think that it needs to be talked about. Um, and and I can only talk to you about it from my perspective, but uh, the lobbyists that I have interacted with, um, you know, do not engage in that type of activity, and so I may be biased, but I I feel like it is a I feel like it is a false stereotype that exists for whatever reason. Um, do lobbyists have relationships with elected officials? Absolutely. I mean, it's necessary in order uh, for um, for policymaking to happen. And I think if you talk to any legislator within the General Assembly, they would express to you the value that lobbyists bring to the state capitol. At the end of the day, whether or not we are compensated or not, if we are working to influence policy at the Capitol, we are all lobbyists to some degree. or another at different levels. Now, are there illegal activities that take place? Absolutely. Just like in any profession, there are bad individuals that, um, you know, do not follow the ethics or the moral obligations that I think that we all have in whatever career that we choose. But I think it is a stereotype that I try to dispel as much as I can.
Mm. Thank you so much for debugging that, like the stereotype that describes most lobbyists, as I heard from a lot of people. Um, in your answers, I think you talk a lot about connections, like how connections pull you into different like career directions. So for those seeking like a career like myself and Tony in both law and policy, we think that connection is really essential. Do you have any tips or tips that you would recommend people to do to make like connections in a meaningful way?
Yeah. Um, I'll start by saying that um, I think most people underestimate the importance of connections, or they might underestimate themselves, and so they choose not to reach out uh, to um, to someone that's been in their profession for a long time, or perhaps to a mentor. And I just want to uh, encourage anybody that is in a relationship oriented type profession to reach out, because as someone that values connectivity and relationships, if someone reaches out to me and wants to have a conversation with me about the career that I've chosen or the career path that they would like to take, I am not going to turn down the possibility of a connection or a relationship. I'm going to say yes. And I think most good lobbyists and most good professionals are going to be the same way. Um, and so when I was starting out, I'm an introvert. Like, I don't naturally reach out to people. It's just not, it's, it's a, it's a discomfort that I have to overcome, but you have to do that. That's the only way that um, you're going to develop from a professional standpoint, is to connect with people that are in your career path. And so that is for me lesson number one. That is, do it. Just reach out to people. Um, I did it when I was with the state agency. I wanted to I wanted to expand my policy knowledge as a lobbyist, and the only way that I could do that was to find a firm to join. And so I Googled lobbying firms in Georgia, and I emailed partners in all those lobbying firms just to let them know my career interest, and that I would love if they had time to sit down with them. Probably 1 out of 10 responded to me, but that's all that it took really to make a connection. And that one, by the way, that responded to me was the firm that I'm at now. And um, had I not taken that step, I would have never made that connection. So just do it. And I think this is equally critical, and I talk about it with my students all the time. Don't rely on them to tell you what they would like you to do. Tell them what you want to do for them.
Mm.
And that helps them not only have their own vision, but have a shared vision with you. When I met with that firm, the firm that I'm with for the first time, I actually did a PowerPoint presentation on how I could help them as a firm. And I don't think they'd ever seen that before. But I think we really kind of have to, when we're thinking about our next career step, we really kind of have to be bold, and we have to take the perspective of um, what value are we going to bring to the person or the company that we're reaching out to.
That is so awesome. I think that's really helpful for everybody who listened to this. So thank you so much for sharing.
Adding on, I think the piece of advice that you made about making connections and selling what you can bring to the table is not only important to the law or government affairs job market. I think in general, it's important to the job market as a whole,
Yeah.
because in this day and age, it's really more about who you know than what you know. And sometimes, people, when they do the job interviews, they often tend to sell at how much they can excel at a given task, when it's really about what you can bring to the company to make them profits and to really excel their customer service so that they are a renowned name. Now, our last question is enveloping your extensive career in public service for young people who are seeking a career like yours or a perhaps even higher position. What key pieces of advice would you give to them to get really started and to guide them on their journey to where they want to be?
Another great question. So the job market is difficult, and it has been for some time. It's saturated with people. And so, in order to get through the noise, you really have to distinguish yourself. And I think it starts with a good resume. I don't have a perfect resume. I can constantly look at the resumes that others send me, just to learn from what I receive. But I think it starts with a good resume, that talks about uh, your skill sets as a professional, but that also ties the work that you've done in the past to what you hope to do in the future. And so, for most college students, um, you don't really have the professional experience that sticks out on the resume. You might have worked as a bartender at a restaurant, or you name it. Um, all of those jobs are still valuable, because you can tie the experiences that you achieved from those jobs with what you hope to do in the future. And whenever I review a resume, I try to coach students on making those connections in the resume. I think a lot of students might even shy away from including some of those job experiences on the resume because they don't think they're relevant. But I think they are, because they show to that company that you do have work experience. And I think that they are absolutely looking for that versus someone that maybe attended college uh, that didn't have any work experience or didn't have any volunteer experience or service experience while they were at college. I think all of those are important. So a resume, I think, is something that's very, very important. And then just study, just knowledge of what opportunities are out there in your field, and again, being bold and reaching out to those potential uh, job providers. And then lastly, I think having mentors, um, other students that might be further ahead in the profession or in experience, uh, professors, um, people that you meet during your internship. Mentors are so important, not just from a career standpoint, but from a life standpoint.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think I learned a lot from those advice. It's like beautifully tied together, like all the lessons you learn, especially the resume part. I myself, and I think a lot of other people usually shy away from putting very small experiences, but I think that proves useful, like being a bartender, barista, restaurant server, into a resume because we think that is not really helpful and like it doesn't sounds impressive, but I think it's really important. Um, and that is all about questions for today. Personally, I learned a lot from this interview as a pre-law student, and I think Tony as well. I hope that people watching this, other than us, either in high school, college, or even like law school, would considering pursuing this career, or take a lot from the advices that you give us. So thank you so much.
Glad, and y'all did a great job, and I'm really proud that y'all are doing this podcast because I think it's important. So thank you for letting me be on today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.